Hello everyone, welcome back to my English class. I am Jyoti Singh and today I am going to explain an important chapter of the book Hornbill of Standard 11th Silk Road, written by Nick Middleton. This story is about narrator's journey from slopes of Rabu to Mount Kailash to complete the Kora. To bid him farewell, Lahamo gave him a long-sleeved sheepskin coat. He hired Teston's car for his journey and took Daniel along to escort him to Darchan. Here are some names which are important characters in this story. These are, first one is Lahamo, the second one is Teston, and third one is Daniel. These are main characters, and the famous places are Ravu, Mount Kailash, Kora, sorry, Darchen. These are important places. And this story is around the protagonist of this story, the narrator, hired Tessetan, who is a driver, to drive him up to Mount Kailash. As in a farewell gift, Lahamo gave him a long-sleeved sheepskin coat and he took Daniel as his companion till Darchen. When they started journey, Teston took a shortcut to the southwest, which was a direct route to Mount Kailash. They had to cross high mountain passes to reach their destinations. When they reached the hill, they passed dark tents which were home for nomads, and they saw mastiffs standing outside the tent as a guard. As soon as they entered the valley, they witnessed snow-capped mountains with rivers flowing, which rivers flowing with which were blocked with ice. They were at 5,210 meters above sea level when they checked. They reached their first hurdle, which was a road filled with snow. And then soon in the afternoon, around 2 o'clock, they stopped for lunch. The protagonist or the narrator's headache was gone by now. At night around 10:30 p.m., they stopped at a guest house in Darchin to spend the night. He stayed awake all night because of suffering from nose congestion due to the change in altitude and cold weather. After taking a full day of medicine, the protagonist was feeling good. According to the local people, in the peak season, of pilgrimage, the place would be filled with travelers. He met a person in the Darchen's only cafe. His name was Normu, who was a Tibetan working in Beijing at the Institute of Ethnic Literature of Chinese Academy of Social Science. So now let's start the explanation of this chapter. This is the summary of this chapter. A flawless half moon floated in a perfect blue sky. In the morning, we said our goodbyes. Extended banks of cloud like long French loaves glowed pink as the sun emerged to splash the distant mountain tops with a rose-tinted blush. Here the narrator says that when he was heading towards Mount Kailash to complete the Kora is a pilgrimage, in the morning, he witnessed a beautiful half moon in the blue sky. The clouds looked like French bread which glowed pink because of the sun, which spread a slash of rays on the mountain tops. Loaves means bread shaped and baked in one piece, which is usually sliced before being eaten. And Kora, it means meditation performed by Buddhist believers. Next, now that we were leaving Ravu, Lahamo said she wanted to give me a farewell present. Here, Lahamo wanted to give him a farewell present. One evening, I had told her through Daniel that I was heading towards Mount Kailas to complete the Korah, and she said that I ought to get some warmer clothes. After ducking back into her tent, she emerged carrying one of the long sleeved sheepskin coats that all the men wore. Tester seized me up as we clambered into his car. Ah, yes, he declared. Darukba, sir. Darukba means shepherds. Next, Ravu and Lahamo wanted to give him a farewell gift, so one evening, when the narrator passed a message to Lahamo through Daniel, she gave him a long sleeved sheepskin coat which is meant for men. Satan looked at him attentively while he climbed into his car. He declared affirmative and said Darukba to him. Darukba means shepherd to him, which means Kora in the region of Tibet. Where is Kora? Kora means in the region of Tibet. A meditation performed by Buddhist believers. And ducking back means going inside and then coming out. The next, we took a shortcut to get off the Changtang. Satan knew a route that would take us southwest almost directly towards Mount Kailas. It involved crossing several fairly high mountain passes, he said. But no problem, sir, he assured us. If there is no snow, what was the likelihood of that? I asked. Not knowing, sir, until we get there. And here he said they took a shortcut to cut off the Changtang. Changtang is the name of a place. The driver, who is the driver? Saturn is the driver, knew the short route which took him to the southwest towards Mount Kailas. They had to pass high mountain passes. Saturn told him that they can reach the destination only if there is no snow, and they can't know that until they will reach there. The first paragraph is completed here. Now come to the next. From the gently rolling hills of Rabu, the shortcut took us across vast open plains with nothing in them except a few gazelles and that would look up from nibbling the arid pastures and frown before rounding away into the void. Gazelles, an African or Asian mammal with large eyes and that moves quickly and hoops. Here, the route was filled with open plains in Ravu, where gazelles were eating grass from the land which had little rain and disapproved while hopping back in the void. Next. Further on, where the plains became more stony than grassy, a great herd of wild ass came into view. Satan told us we were approaching them long before they appeared. Kyang, he said, pointing towards a far off pile of dust. Then, he said, as they moved forward, a large group of wild asses means donkeys, appeared. Satan told him that they were approaching the wild asses long before they appeared there. Arid means having little or no rain. And nibbling means take a small bite. And frown means to disapprove of something. And bounding means jump, hop, or bounce. The next one. When we drew near, I could see the herd galloping en masse, wheeling and turning in tight formation. That is they were practicing maneuvers on some predetermined course. Plumes of dust billowed under the crisp and clean air. Here, herd means a large group of animals, and galloping means progressing in an uncontrollable manner. En masse means in a group. And maneuvers means military exercises. And plums means trails. And the last one, billowed, it means filled with air, swelled out. And then Saturn pointed out a huge pile of dust, which he called Kyang in his social local language. When they drew nearer to the destination, they could see a large group of animals progressing in a fast and uncontrollable manner, like they were doing military exercises. Trails of dust filled with air. Trails means plums. Next. Then, as hills started to push up once more from the rocky wilderness, he passed solitary dorkbas tending their flocks, sometimes men, sometimes women. These well wrapped figures would pause and stare at our car, occasionally waving as we passed. When the truck looked us close to their animals, the sheep would take evasive action, veering away from the speeding vehicle. Wilderness means wasteland, solitary means private, and flocks a group of words, and evasive means sleepy, and veering means to change direction suddenly. And shaggy means bushy or hairy. Here he said that as they moved past the rocky area, they came across private koras nurturing their group of birds. Both men and women stared at their car, and some also waved at them. As they moved closer to the animals, the sheep would take a slippery path and would suddenly move into another action. They away from our car. The next one. We passed nomads, dark tents, pitched in splendid isolation, usually with a huge black dog, a Tibetan mastiff, standing guard. These beasts would cock their great big heads when they become aware of our approach and fix us in their sights. As we continued to draw closer, they would explode into action, speeding directly towards us like a bullet from a gun and nearly as fast. Now, here he says that by now we could. Next, he says that they witnessed. They witnessed nomad stands which were dark in complete isolation and a big black Tibetan dog standing as their guard. They fixed their gaze on the approaching car and ran behind it as a bullet fired from a gun. Now next, these these shaggy monsters, blacker than the darkest night, usually wore bright red collars and darked furiously with massive jaws. They were completely fearless of our vehicle, shooting straight into our path, causing Satan to break the swerve. It means change direction suddenly. The dog would make chase for 100 meters or so before easing off. Having seen us off the property, it wasn't difficult to understand why ferocious Tibetan mastiffs became popular in China's imperial courts as hunting dogs, brought along the Silk Road in ancient times as tribute from Tibet. And here ferocious means cruel or violent, and mastiffs means a dog who is standing breed with dropping your shaggy ears, and glinting means sparkle or twinkle. Now here those bushy creatures were blacker than the normal black color, who were a bright red color, and they barked angrily at them with big jaws. Here the narrator here the narrator describes the dogs. They are more blacker than the normal black color, and they wore bright red colors, and they barked in anger, and they have big jaws. These dogs were fearless and were running towards the car, causing Saturn to apply brakes and change direction suddenly. The dogs ran after them for 100 meters more and then stopped to watch them go away. And the dogs followed them for more than 100 meters. These Tibetan mastiff means dogs, became popular in China's royal courts. Imperial means royal courts as hunting dogs. In China, they are known as hunting dogs. They were brought along the Silk Route as tribute in ancient times from Tibet. Next, by now we could see snow-capped mountains gathering on the horizon. We entered a valley where the river was wide and mostly closed with ice, brilliant white and glinting in the sunshine. The trail hugged its bank, twisting with the meanders as we gradually gained height and the valley sides closed in. And here he says that meanders means to follow a winding course of a river or road. Now here he says that as they passed the area with bushy Tibetan dogs, they started witnessing snow-capped mountains. And then they entered the valley, which was covered with wide river covered with ice, and there was ice only, which was white and shiny in the sun. The track was moving along the river bank as they gained height, and the valley was closing in towards them. And then further the turns became sharper and the ride bumpier. Saturn now in third gear as we continued to climb. The track moved away from the icy river, laboring through steeper slopes that sported big rocks daubed with patches of bright orange lichen. Beneath the rocks, hunks of snow clung on in the near permanent shade. I felt the pressure building up in my ears, held my nose, snorted and cleared them. Dubbed means spread a thick sticky substance on a surface carelessly. And lichen means a slow growing plant which grows on walls, trees or rocks. And clung means hold tightly onto something, and swath means a long strip of land. And then what the writer says, the driver was driving in third gear while the turns were sharper and the ride got bumpier. Then they moved away from the road which ran along the icy river. It had sharp slopes and big rocks coated with thick, sticky orange lichen. Below the rocks were clumps of snow. The protagonist protagonist or the narrator felt a pressure on his ears. He held his nose and snorted in order to clear them. A sharp turn came again, and Saturn stopped the car and jumped out from his seat. David, too, did the same. He exclaimed, "Snow!" in his excitement. We struggled right round another tight bend, and Saturn stopped. He had opened his door and jumped out of his seat before I realized what was going on. "Snow," said Daniel, the another passenger, as he took excited the vehicle, letting in a breath of cold air. As he did so, a swath of white stuff lay across the track in front of us, stretching for maybe 15 meters before it pattered out and the desert and the dirt trail reappeared. The snow continued on either side of us, smoothing the abrupt bank of the upslope side. The bank was too steep for our vehicle to scale, so there was no round the snow patch. I joined Daniel as Saturn strapped onto the encrusted snow and began to slither and slide forward, stamping his foot from time to time to ascertain how sturdy it was. I looked at my wristwatch. We were at 5,210 meters above sea level. And then pattered out means to diminish gradually and stop, and encrusted means decorated with a hard surface layer, and slither means to move smoothly over a surface. And then a long track of snow was in front of them. It was about 15 meters long before it diminished and the normal dirty track appeared again. The snow was on both sides of them, and it was difficult to move the vehicle in that condition. The protagonist joined Daniel as Saturn tried to move smoothly over the snowy surface by stamping his feet on the surface. The narrator saw his wristwatch. They were 5,210 meters away. Further, the snow didn't look too deep to me, but the danger wasn't its depth, Daniel said, so much as its icy top layer. If we slip off, the car could turn over, he suggested, as we saw Saturn grab handfuls of dirt and fling them across the frozen surface. We both pitched in, and when the snow was spread with soil, Daniel and I stayed out of the vehicle to lighten Saturn's load. He backed up and drove towards the dirty snow, eased the car on its icy surface, and slowly drove its length without apparent difficulty. And then he said, the snow was deep beneath its icy top surface. Daniel said that Daniel said that if they turned their car over, they could slip off. Saturn grabbed dirt and threw it across the frozen surface. They pitched in and helped Saturn until he saw until the snow with soil appeared, and it loaded the tension of Saturn. He drove back the car and slowly drove to the more comfortable side of the road. Then, 10 minutes later, we stopped at another blockage. "Not good, sir," Saturn announced as he jumped out again to survey the scene. This time he decided to try and drive round the snow. The slope was steep and studded with major rocks, but somehow Saturn negotiated them, his four-wheel drive vehicle lurching from one obstacle to the next. In so doing, he cut off one of the hairpin bends, regaining the trail further up where the snow had not drifted. Feeling means through and lurching means listening. Then, after 10 minutes, Saturn stopped again as another obstacle came in front of them. They drove around the snowy track, which was steep and filled with rocks. He further drove from the hairpin bend, moving on the higher side where the snow was still there. Then Then I checked my watch again as we continued to climb in the bright sunshine. We crept fast past 5,400 meters and my head began to throb horribly. I took gulps from my water bottle, which is supposed to help a rapid ascent. Throb means pulsate and ascent means climb on an upward slope. And here the narrator checked his watch again while he was climbing the mountain in the bright sunshine. It was afternoon. They moved up to 5,400 meters height and his head began to pulsate again. Again he felt that there is headache. He had a few sips of water from his bottle, which helped him to climb the slope. Then we finally reached the top to pass at 5,515 meters. It was marked by a large scairn of rocks fastened with white silk scarves and raised prayer flags. We all took a turn round the cairn in a clockwise direction as is the tradition, and Saturn checked the tires on his vehicle. He stopped at the petrol pump tank and partially unscrewed the top, which emitted a loud hiss. The lower atmospheric pressure was allowing the fuel to expand. It sounded dangerous to me. Maybe, sir, Saturn laughed, but no smoking. Cairn of rocks means the pile of stone on the top of the mountain, and festooned means decorated. Here, here the narrator says they reached at 5,515 meters, and a large pile of stone was decorated with white silk scarves and some dirty prayer flags. They took a turn round that stone in a clockwise direction, as in the tradition, and the driver checked the tires of his vehicle. He stopped at the petrol tank and unscrewed its top, which made a loud hiss noise as the pressure was making the fuel expand. The driver told him maybe it is dangerous, but told him not to smoke around there. Next, my headache soon cleared as we carried down the other side of the pass. It was 2 o'clock by the time we stopped for lunch. We ate hot noodles inside a long canvas tent, part of a work camp erected beside a dry salt lake. The plateau is pockmarked with salt flats and brackish lakes, vestige of the Tithe Ocean, which bordered Tibet before the great continental collision that lifted in skyward. This one was a hive of activity, men with pickaxes and shovels trudging back and forth in their long sheepskin coats and salt encrusted boots. All wore sunglasses against the glare as a steady as a steady stream of blue trucks emerged from the blindingly white lakes, laden with piles of salt. And there he said that career down means sinking the slopes, and salt flats means thatched roof covered with snow. And here he says that his headache cleared as they descended down the slope. It was 2 o'clock. when they stopped for lunch at a long canvas tent beside the dry salt lake. They had not noodles, the plateau was disfigured, and the lake was filled with salty water, and that roof covered with snow. It had traces of extinct Tides Ocean, which used for border Tibet before the collision of the continent. Few men were working there with pickaxes and shovels. They were wearing sunglasses to minimize the glare coming from blue trucks loaded with pile of salt, salt encrusted boots and long sheepskin coats. Now we will continue this chapter in the next video. Thank you for listening and watching this video.